one of the best things about what I'd say leaders do is training and developing future leaders. And I think that's the kind of legacy that one needs to look at. I think my legacy is going to be how many future leaders am I going to be remembered as tutoring and developing at Ella?
Hi everyone, it's Jo. You're listening to Occupational Hazards, a series of candid conversations with some of the most inspiring people I know as they share their path to finding their calling and all the gritty realities of their jobs. Whether you want to demystify your dream job or are someone like me who enjoys getting a peek into other people's work lives, then this is the podcast for you.
Our next guest learned to swim by being thrown in the deep end. He became CEO right before the global lockdowns of 2020. Mohamed Rasheed Almaraj is the Chief Executive Officer of Ella Bank, a digital retail bank established in Bahrain. The first cloud-based digital mobile-only bank in the Middle East, Ella was conceived to offer seamless banking experiences, reflecting modern lifestyles and accelerating inclusion through its accessibility on smart devices, as well as its lowest income threshold to open an account in the market. Prior to being named CEO, Mohamed served as Chief Operating Officer of Ella prior to launch, where he oversaw all operations and support functions, including compliance, risk, audit, HR, information security, and the project management office. He also served as Vice President of Group Strategy at Arab Banking Corporation, or Bank ABC, the parent company of Ella Bank. Bank ABC is in various countries in the Middle East and North Africa, Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Before joining Bank ABC, Mohamed built his career in finance, starting out as an investment banker at Perella Weinberg Partners in New York, where he worked in corporate mergers and acquisitions. Deals he worked on included advising the New York Stock Exchange on its $10.2 billion sale to Intercontinental Exchange, as well as corporate restructuring deals in tech, media, telecom, and financial services. Mohamed graduated magna cum laude from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, where he obtained a Bachelor of Science in Economics with concentrations in finance and accounting. Mohamed currently serves as a board member on the boards of Arab Financial Services, Bahrain Car Parks Company, King Fahd Causeway Authority, and Finzo. He also actively volunteers with Dreams Society, a Bahraini-based organization working on granting the dreams of children with terminal illnesses. On this episode, Mohamed chats with us about the progressive regulatory landscape for fintech in Bahrain, about turning failures into lessons, future expansion plans of the bank, and how leadership will ultimately be his legacy. We didn't have time to discuss all the operations of the bank, but do check out the links in the show notes if you want to learn more about Ella and its various services. I was particularly interested in how they were able to enable a seamless, fully digital account opening experience, an instant virtual credit card for online transactions. You get that right as you sign up for your account, a multi-currency account, and a current account that offers interest without a minimum balance or tenure. So that's the future of banking. Anyway, without further ado, here's Mohamed to tell us more about how he launched this venture.
Hi, Mohamed.
Hi, Joanne. Thank you for the invite and thank you for having me here. Quite excited to be chatting with you on some exciting topics, and hopefully it's going to be an interesting session for the audience.
Yeah, I'm extremely interested because actually you seem to have had the most exciting pandemic arc of all. So I've been asking guests what their pandemic arc has been like, and I saw that in the news you were appointed CEO of Ella Bank in February 2020. This was right before the pandemic kind of hit the rest of the world. What was that like, to assume that position at such a pivotal time in history?
I mean, talk about, what do they say, like throwing someone in the deep to learn before they sink, before they swim. It was a fantastic, to be honest, experience for me personally. I think it really threw me right at the heart of what it is to be a CEO of an upcoming startup, especially one that has embraced digital at its heart. Without a doubt, it was quite challenging. Let me tell you, I got appointed probably around mid-February, and within 2 weeks, the kind of pandemic euphoria hit here in the island, and I had to move most of my team to be working from home, around 70%. So we had a ratio of 70 to 30 to start off with. I maintained being in the office, but it was just kind of an exceptional moment because I had just assumed position. I was just kind of setting the stone in terms of the business of building the team, building the processes. And please keep in mind that Ella Bank, the bank that I assumed ownership of in terms of the leadership, had just gone live in Bahrain publicly. Having been a startup for many years in the making, Ella went live in December of 2019 as a beta version. And then, the plan was always to go with a big bang in March of 2020. So, assumed the leadership position in mid-Feb, took it live, I'd say, publicly in March 2020. But I think the one thing that I learned was it's really down to the people. I was so blessed to have a fantastic group of individuals and team working with me. So that made life so much easy when it came to going from working into a work from home kind of setup. And the second thing I think, which I'm glad the company had an eye to do before the pandemic, was to really create a bank that provided all its services on the cloud. So we are one of the first banks to be fully hosted on the cloud. We use the Amazon Web Services cloud. And that gave us the ability, wherever you were on the team, to basically access the systems of the bank and basically facilitate your day-to-day job. And, that meant that it was a smooth transition for people from a technological perspective to work from home. Maybe from a, let's call it, cultural and personal perspective, it was a bit difficult, but from a technological perspective, it was quite easy. So I have to say it was quite the interesting, I'd say, start to my career, obviously as a CEO, and my first, let's say, CEO tenure.
Yes, but before you assumed the position of CEO, you had actually been COO of this venture pre-launch. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I was actually employee number one at the beginning, back in 2017, when the bank was being put together. So let me give you a perspective about the bank. The bank is fully owned as a subsidiary of one of the largest wholesale pan-Arab banks in the Middle East, called Arab Banking Corporation, Bank ABC, which basically put faith in this new sort of era of banking and said, listen, we need to have a digital challenger bank as part of our banking family. And they put in the money and the commitment from the board perspective to really develop this. So yes, I was from the beginning on it, developed a business plan, started hiring people, was appointed as COO by the company, the mother company, and luckily then got appointed as CEO.
Yeah, I think it's a very unique situation for a CEO to be able to build out the team and also lay the foundation before going live. I mean, I've seen some startups where they bring on a CEO later when the founders, need kind of adult supervision, quote unquote. So it's a fantastic thing that you were able to, I guess, lay the groundwork before you went live, I guess, but in relation to culture and startup culture, can you tell me a little bit more about what it was like to join Bank ABC when you had first moved back to Bahrain? Because that's a slightly older institution, right? About 41 years old.
Yeah, I think it was, to be honest, quite the journey. I started off as basically after college working in New York at Perella Weinberg Partners, which was a boutique investment bank, basically in the M&A and corporate restructuring sector. And interestingly, I was there during the financial crisis. So it was one kind of a experience just seeing what was happening on Wall Street at the time and got to work on really interesting deals. And then being in the investment banking sort of culture of long hours, very demanding timelines, I think gave me a very different perspective on sort of work. And then I had to move back to Bahrain, where I ended up working at Bank ABC in their strategy team. I think there was definitely a cultural shift in terms of the way you balance work and your sort of personal life. I think in the Middle East, probably there was a bigger stress on finding the right balance between work and your personal life versus, I'd say, the US and that investment banking culture that I was in. I think one of the things that, to my surprise, I was worried about is I was worried that let's say, the sophistication, the level of complexity when it came at work, I wouldn't be able to find in the Middle East. And to my pleasant surprise, I actually landed in the perfect job, working with the perfect people that really were able to take my career, I'd say, to the next step. Because at Perella Weinberg in New York, where I was working, I was mainly a technical guy. So, I was dealing with numbers, I was dealing with valuation, I was dealing with some strategic work. But when it came to moving back and really assuming a position in ABC, at that point, it was really about being a leader and how I was going to handle projects and being able to take things from A to Z and deliver them, and really building teams and hiring people. So I feel that I was able to move at the right time after really building the foundations right. And then I think culturally, from a personal perspective, it was a bit of a change, in terms of like work-life balance. There was more emphasis on it in the Middle East. At the same time, I moved back to Bahrain where my family is. So at least there was a different aspect for me around, being around my family and folks. So, it had its pluses and minuses. I'd say the biggest challenge was not being in sort of as you know, New York is like a kitchen and a melting pot of so many different people from so many different parts of the world, from so many different backgrounds. So I kind of missed that a little bit when I left New York, for sure.
Yes, but Bahrain also has quite a large foreigner/expatriate population, right?
Yeah, it does. Bahrain has and maintains a large expat population, more than the
More than the
locals.
locals, right?
Yeah, and that's something that we as locals are quite proud of, because we really pride on our country being quite accessible and hospitable to all kinds of peoples and cultures and religions. So it's actually something that we as locals take great pride in.
Yeah, so as you launched Bank, how did you go about thinking which customer segments you were going to target? Because there is a local population, but you also have a foreign population who might be maybe traveling more. How did you go about tailoring products to these different segments?
So I think the beauty about building a digital bank and having it built on the idea of really AI, machine learning, and this, I'd say, obsession with building around what customer wants, we were really able to build a bank that was as much as possible catered to all kinds of segments in the society, which was fantastic, because I think it's quite important given Bahrain's population. Bahrain is around, I'd say, 1.2 million. And so in terms of a population, it's not as big as many other countries around us. So what we wanted to do is really build a platform that catered to as many people as possible. And what our infrastructure and the technologies that we were using really helped us to do that, because we were able to customize things very quickly for different people. So, the app has different languages. Our marketing platforms and engagement models allow us to communicate with our customers in different languages. So we've also built around this so-called diversity within the society to try to include everyone. I think we wouldn't have been able to do it if we had the traditional banking model of like a branch, because you're not going to have like a branch for every different, call it, language, or a branch for every different segment, young, old, etc. That would be too expensive. But your ability to have, for example, if you're from a certain expat community and you wanted a certain language, that's very easily accessible on the Ella app. So that made it quite easy to attract all different kinds of segments.
Yeah, that's great. I had a look actually at the website before we got on the call, and I thought it was very accessible and welcoming, which is,
That's great.
you know, what was the transition like from investment banking to retail banking? And maybe you can give also your thoughts on how you decided to go into the retail banking sector.
For sure. I think from an investment banking perspective, I think one of the things that you're always focused on is really trying to get value to your customers. So, you're usually a buy-side advisor or you're a sell-side advisor. So the type of work that I was doing was always around valuation, trying to understand the business, trying to find the potential value drivers of a business. So it was really a analytical kind of work. And the one thing I hated, to be honest, about investment banking was I never got to feel how it was like being day to day in the operations of the companies we were advising. And it was a bit frustrating because, you did everything on paper. You went to see the client, but you never spent like months with the customer on the, plant factory, etc. And so really what was happening. So I think what was fantastic about moving to like more of a retail operations is that I got to deal with customers all the time. So I went from like being a B2B in investment banking, you're catering to companies. So I kind of went from a B2B to a B2C, and that's a completely different model. I mean, think of each and every one of us. We have our different daily demands on the companies that we deal with. So, I had to deal with so many different types of people in a B2C, and it was quite, I'd say, the interesting sort of challenge because I went from dealing with customers who would communicate once every week to people who wanted communication every other hour. Customers, demand certain type of engagement, and you have to give it to them all the time. So it was quite interesting. And then the reason I felt I wanted to go into retail banking more than anything is because of my interest, which was really trying to get into technology somehow. I felt that the retail banking sector was about to be disrupted by technology. So having said that, I felt that when I moved to Bahrain, I was like, the retail banking sector in Bahrain is already strong. So why don't I try to come in with a certain niche of technology and trying to disrupt it?
Yeah, your country has been one that I've been so fascinated by because you are so forward thinking in terms of embracing technology to transform the financial service industry, because you're a regional financial center, right, in that part of the world. And I see the words regulatory sandbox being thrown around a lot in the business coverage of the fintech sector there. Do you think you can talk about maybe what makes Bahrain special in terms of the adoption of technology as well as the digital transformation of the banking industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I look at an environment of sort of that's inclusive for fintech, I look at different things. A regulator that is forward thinking and has put together a set of regulations that are, let's say, encouraging for people to innovate, disrupt, and maybe push the boundary. Then I look at the players within the market. Are there banks that are willing to accept disruption to their business sort of fundamental, whether it's from operations to customer engagement, etc.? And third, are there, let's say, skill sets within the market that can basically implement these disruptive technologies? And I think all in all, Bahrain had all of these components come together at the right time. The Central Bank of Bahrain was the first central bank within the Middle East to establish a dedicated unit for fintech, and was the first central bank in the Middle East to establish a full cloud regulation, which basically allowed companies in the financial services sector to adopt cloud first strategies. Additionally, they also sort of launched several regulations around cryptocurrencies, around robo-advisory, around open banking. So they really embraced, I think, fintech from the beginning. And funny enough, I think within Bahrain, which you don't see quite often, the regulator was way ahead of all the local banks in terms of digitization. So the regulator was pushing the local banks to digitize. Then you had, again, I think something interesting in Bahrain, you had really good talent. I think talent that was basically able to work within, the technology and IT sector of the new world, which is, you needed people that were really skilled in cloud-based strategies, implementing cloud solutions, security of cloud, people that were really sort of geared towards skill sets in this new whole world of IT and digital, which some of them are like DevOps engineer, UI, UX, designers, mobile app developers. So all of this, I think, culminated within environments in Bahrain that really supported the drive towards fintech in Bahrain. And then I think this spilled over in the larger Middle East.
Yes. What are your thoughts on omnichannel? This is a word that gets thrown around a lot. I was listening to a panel of people in the fintech sector, and in places like South Africa, where maybe more people are unbanked, places like the Philippines, I think that there is this prevailing notion that you still need that omni-channel kind of offline and online retail presence in order to be successful. But in Bahrain, it seems that there's a higher, I would say maybe digital literacy, higher mobile penetration and internet connectivity. So any thoughts on omni-channel and its place in Bahrain?
Yeah. So I think the word omnichannel definitely gets used a lot. And the idea of omnichannel basically is the customer engagement model that you have. So omnichannel means, multi-channel basically. So a lot of banks, in the past had probably one engagement model, right? Which were you needed to show up to the branch, take a ticket, wait in line, speak to a teller, speak to a customer services representative, and do that. And I think what this whole age of technology has brought in is the ability to communicate over multiple levels. So you can have live chat now. You can communicate with your customers through the app. You can communicate with your customers through all kinds of social media platforms. You can communicate with your customers through other apps. You could put an advertisement in sort of a game, right? So there's like this cross collaboration between digital platforms. So that's basically omni-channels. You can even have customer chats now on WhatsApp. So that's really the idea of omni-channel. And then I think in Bahrain, that worked well because you had a community that had almost the penetration of smartphones, I believe, so if I'm not mistaken, is around north of 95%. And on average, people have 1.3 phones, which means basically that a huge number of the population has like either two devices, either two smartphones, or have a smartphone and a tablet. So this in itself was basically an indication that, hey guys, as banks move from the traditional one-dimensional communication, which was through the branch, to an omni-channel methodology through an app and all the other items that I related to.
Mm-hmm. What about the services and product offerings for small businesses and small to medium enterprises?
No, to be honest with you, we haven't launched an offering towards small and medium businesses, but it is at the heart of what we do in terms of our business plan in the future. So we started off basically building, Ella as a consumer-only bank to start off with, given the resources that we have, the timelines that were dictated to us by our investors, the size of the team that we had. And our idea was, let's go and win the people's hearts. Let's have thousands of customers. Individuals are much easier to acquire. Let these people be ambassadors for us, and maybe some of them are our SME owners, and then let us launch SMEs. And this got validated after a year. What we found is that while we launched the consumer business, we have been working on the SME business, and a lot of our customers are now demanding SME business. They're saying, okay, I bank with Ella personally. I want my coffee shop. I want my small paper factory, all to be now on Ella. So we are working on SME proposition. What we're really focusing on, and what we found is SMEs here in the region, especially in Bahrain, have an issue when it comes to receiving funds. So most of these SMEs get paid, by credit or debit. And they always have like T plus 6 days, T plus 8 days, T plus X amount, sometimes up to 2 weeks to basically get the cash. And this basically puts them in a sort of a difficult sort of liquidity position. So they're always under stress and they don't have enough liquidity to maintain like sort of sustainable growth. So what we're trying to build is create a proposition that will allow basically these companies to get settlements, and sort of instantaneously. So that was one. Secondly, we're also, I think one of the things that got frustrating for a lot of SMEs, and especially during the corona pandemic, is that a lot of them were not ready to accept digital types of payments. Either it could be mobile payments or sort of peer-to-peer transfers or QR payments through QR code. So we're also building a sort of payments in a box solution for these SMEs to fix the SME pain point when it comes to payments. And then the third thing, a lot of them are in need of credit and access to cash. And what we're trying to do is also build sort of instantaneous credit scoring mechanism for us to be able to understand these SME businesses and give them the right kind of loan origination.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how you continue to develop the product offerings, because it sounds like, they got a taste of it and now they want to do more. They want to have more interaction with the kind of, I guess, ILA. So
exactly.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Mohamed talks about wanting to empower small businesses and improve his surrounding communities in this episode. If you're ever in the Philippines, do check out MAD Travel. MAD is short for Make a Difference, and MAD Travel is a social enterprise that works for and with marginalized communities in creating impactful and authentic travel experiences. They aim to empower and inspire both the communities and travelers through creative, authentic, fun, unique experiences. I was able to go on one of their treks to Mount Puro Nature Reserve, where they're doing some reforestation work with local communities, and I thought it was very inspiring. So do check them out on social media to see the latest news on the trips and programs that they're launching and operating in this new normal, and go on adventures that matter today. For more information, visit madtravel.org, check out their Facebook page, that's facebook.com/makeadifferencetravel, or go to their Instagram at madtravel_ph. Oh, if you're doing online holiday shopping, you can also check out the Mad Market, which is an online marketplace featuring goods from local farmers, small businesses, and their partner communities. The Mad Market was launched in 2020 to help with the livelihood of communities that were the hardest hit economically by the lockdowns. If you're interested, check out madmarket.co or Instagram at makeadifferencemarket.
In terms of other factors that might have been unique to ILA, because there are various digital banks now launching around the world, but a large population that you serve is actually of the Islamic faith and does sharia banking. Can you talk a little bit about how that was a factor as you developed the products and services?
Yeah, I think Islamic banking in itself has its own sort of regulations and rules. So I think just to make it easier for the audience, the concept of Islamic banking or Sharia banking is sort of focused towards Muslims who believe that their financial matters need to be basically within the framework of Sharia, which is Islamic, basically call it jurisprudence or Islamic, basically law. And because of that, and because of Bahrain having a big Muslim population, a lot of people end up demanding these kinds of services. I'd say what we've done is we believed from the get-go that people care about basically having first and foremost an exceptional banking experience before they look at it, whether it is conventional or Islamic, and then they look at these things. So what we said to ourselves, we built a bank that could be Islamic and conventional, and we will be offering both to our customers. So we started off first with conventional products, and now we're launching Islamic products. And the reason, like I said, there are people that really want to have Islamic products. And I think the struggle that we had, to be honest with you, is how do we basically convince the audience that we were both, that we were conventional and that they were Islamic. That was a struggle when we were trying to think about things. But then what we realized is that it's quite easy to do because of the way the app was built. Remember, we were an app-based bank, so we could have easily a Islamic, call it, version of the app, and we could have a conventional version of the app, and we leave it to our customers to decide which ones they wanted to. At the end of the day, we're providing services to both, and I think it works well.
Sure. In terms of offering it to different types of people, along your roadmap, or maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the expansion plans. Are there geographic expansion plans in the works?
Yeah, we're actually, the way we were built is that we built the bank basically in Bahrain with the idea that the bank was going to be built for the wider Middle East. So the commitment that we have from the board is that we need to build this bank pan-Arab, just like our mother company. So we started in Bahrain. We actually just now started like building the bank. We haven't launched yet in Jordan, which is quite exciting. That's the second market for Ella. We're going into Egypt. We're going into also other North African countries such as Algeria and Tunisia. So we're expanding quite well in the Middle East. And, if other jurisdictions pop up for us, we're definitely going to take it. As the audience may know, although the Middle East is a big sort of region, every country in itself has its own unique type of regulations. So what happens is we need to build the bank in these countries and making sure that they relate to the regulations of each of these countries. So this is sort of the focus for now. There's also talks about us maybe expanding into the wider Asian markets. These are still in its infancy, but I don't see why we're going to continuously grow within Africa and Asia and the Middle East.
Yeah, that's very exciting. All centers of growth, and you're at the forefront of all of them.
Exactly.
Yeah. In your previous role, while you were more involved at Bank ABC, I saw that you had done some work in Dubai and Singapore. Do you think you could talk about how the things you learned on those projects, in the international footprint of Bank ABC, helped shape your approach to international growth for Illa?
Yeah, I think the one thing, that international growth, when I was working on opening up the offices in Dubai and also working with the team in Singapore, is that you need to understand that every country has its own cultural sensitivities. You can't go to every country dealing with the people on the ground in the same way. Every country has its own way of doing things, conducting meetings, way of doing business, way of communication, phone versus email versus face-to-face. And then the second thing is every country has its own regulatory environment, which you need to be sensitive about. And you can't just say, I've got Illa and Bahrain and I'm just going to copy paste it somewhere else. No, that's not the way it is. And that's what I realized really quickly when I was working on, things in Dubai and things in Singapore. They're not just copy paste. Every implementation in every country requires its own effort and its own detail to appreciate the environments of all of these countries. So that's definitely the first thing. And then secondly is just you need to be flexible enough when you're growing geographically to make sure that you understand, again, the cultural sensitivities of every country. And the third thing is you really need to meet the people in person, having phone calls, having, I think, Timmy, Zoom and video and audio calls with the people that you're going to work with in the other country. Yes, it is doable to a certain extent, but you can't be just commanding from headquarters. You need to go sit down with the people, build reports with them, make them feel like they're part of something bigger. So these are all the things I learned, having worked on these several initiatives.
Yeah, I'm very interested in seeing how you continue to use what you've learned. Flexibility, I think you touched on that, is absolutely the key. Things are changing so quickly. You alluded to this earlier. You said it was like learning to swim by being thrown in the deep end of the pool. And I think you've emerged like an Olympic medalist in swimming. So, I look forward to seeing all that you continue to launch. I guess to take it back a few steps, how did you decide that this was a path you wanted to pursue? Because you studied finance and accounting, you worked in banking. Was this always what you wanted to do from a young age?
Definitely. I think, having lived in a household of bankers and also lived in a country growing up where banking was basically one of the most important sectors, I feel that, all my life I've been around this industry. I also haven't gone to university at University of Pennsylvania in Wharton. Financial services was always at the top of everyone's agenda and dream. So just the environment that I grew in really drive me towards that. And then once I got to where I was, I felt that it really complemented sort of my passions and my interests and also my demeanor and personality.
Yeah. What's your favorite part about what you do?
I think working with people, one of the best things about what I'd say leaders do is training and developing future leaders. And I think that's the kind of legacy that one needs to look at. I think my legacy is not going to be just being part of this great bank called Illa Bank and, taking it from scratch and building it, but more so around how many future leaders am I going to be remembered as tutoring and developing at Illa? The things that I want to do, like in 10, 20 years, I want to be sitting at a table and I want people to say, hey, I hired someone from Ella and they were like superstars. And now I'm putting them as CEOs. Hopefully Ella generates 10 other CEOs. And that's really, I think, what I want my legacy to be. And it's what I enjoy on a daily basis. And then secondly, I think what's fantastic and what I enjoy is really having the satisfaction of reading a social media comment where someone would say, you really created a product that speaks to me, that I enjoy. That brings so much satisfaction on a day-to-day basis for me. If I'm able to really create something that I can put in people's hand and people really embrace and are able to really utilize and get value from.
It's like the human side of banking, which actually doesn't get talked about very much.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about maybe not the least favorite? It could be something that you don't mind doing, but a part of the job that other people who were not so sure whether this was a path they wanted to pursue would be turned off by.
You mean in terms of something that's quite challenging in this journey?
Well, something that's been challenging, I guess, in your role as, I guess, working in banking or even as CEO of a bank.
I think sort of the biggest challenge that one forgets about is when you become CEO, it's not only about leading your team. There are so many different stakeholders that you need to think about. You're going to need to deal with your board, and that requires a lot of time and effort and dedication. You're going to need to deal with the larger shareholder base that own maybe your stock. Third, you're going to need to be the face of the organization when it comes to dealing with the media. Then you're going to need to be the face of the organization when it comes to dealing with the regulator and other sort of government entities. You're also going to be the face of the organization when it comes to dealing with customers and, God forbid, let's say, issues that customers are facing. So the responsibility of that can become quite daunting to some. And maybe I know a few people at my age that have become CEO did not expect that this element is quite, I'd say, demanding. So that aspect, you don't really know when when you're coming up in your career and you're, like, let's say, an associate or a director of investment banking, you don't have a board on top of you telling you, I need an update, governing you, etc. But when you become a CEO, you do not need to only worry about your team and the business itself, but you got all these stakeholders that you need to also work with.
Yeah. So along the same veins, the theme of the podcast is occupational hazards. We're trying to demystify some of these professions. What would you tell somebody, or how would you fill this blank in? Don't pursue this path if you blank. How would you fill in the blank?
Good question. I'd say don't pursue this path if you're someone who enjoys 8 to 4 every day, same thing. So if you're a monotonous kind of person who enjoys just doing the same thing every day with a set amount of time, don't do this, because this journey requires the stomach of having to deal with changes every single day, because technology keeps on changing, and every time technology changes, that means you need to do changes to the business, to the way you do things, etc. So that's one. Number two, I think, you know what, I'll stop with that. I think that's really the one thing I'd say, don't do this if you're that type of person.
Sure. The question just came from a former boss where during interviews, he used to scare off the applicants by telling them all of the things that they might encounter that they would find difficult. And then he told me on the side, like after the interview, that if that guy still, or that guy or girl still wants the job after I scared them, then they're the right person because they know what they're expecting. So that was the idea actually for the podcast. Another comment that tends to come up from our listeners, because we get some listener feedback and they comment on the guests that have been on the pod, and a lot of them are like yourself, you look at the resume and it's kind of gold stars across the board, magna cum laude, all of this. But do you think you could tell us about a time when you maybe failed or went through a personal or professional disappointment, and then how you dealt with that?
I think, from a failure perspective, I think the biggest thing that I felt I really impacted maybe the way I thought I was going to go about doing things is when we were sort of starting to do ILA, the very first, call it MVP, that I proposed to the board and to the stakeholders got completely obliterated, I would even say, by the board. And it's something that I invested so much time and effort putting together. But you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to do basically what I called listening to the customers that I was eventually going to market to, and really trying to understand if they were going to accept this proposition that I put together. Because I was naive enough to think that I knew exactly what the customers wanted at that point. And I think the feeling you kind of like get when after you've worked months so hard, where someone just says, this is completely wrong and completely not on top of what I think your customers want, was really hurtful, no doubt. But once I said to myself, you know what, I've put in all this effort now, I'm not going to give up so easily. So what I did is I took what I had and I basically revalidated it with the type of customers that I wanted, and realized that what I had was a good base, but needed more tweaks, a few more details here and there. And I did that for an additional 3 months, then went to the board and they loved what I did. But I think when the board that day sort of tore apart what I had originally as a vision and sort of an implementation, it really was a low point. And I felt at that point, on all honesty, that I shouldn't continue. That, listen, I put in all this effort and this is the dream, this is the vision, and they're so harsh with it. But to be honest, I picked it up, and now I know that was one of the greatest experiences, because getting critical feedback and really trying to understand what the customers want have really made ILA what it is right now, and given me that discipline as a CEO to tell my team, and whatever they do, you have to get customers' feedback.
Okay. MVP would be the minimum viable product, right? For those
exactly
not familiar.
Exactly.
Okay. I love that you made lemonade out of that, and that it was just an iteration, not a failure, but just an iteration that you had to go through before you got to a successful one. In terms of what's next for you, your own career plans and goals, what do you see on the horizon?
I think the most important thing for me is really trying to get not only ILA geographically expanded, but I would love to really try to leave a lasting impact on the communities that we try to go to. My dream is that I travel to Jordan, Egypt, and wherever, and maybe sit in a restaurant and see people paying with ILA, and maybe walk on the streets and see all these small shops maybe having a sticker that ILA is accepted here. I really want to go away and say to myself that I've put something in people's hand that people are using day to day.
Yes. And when you go into the new countries, are you looking for any collaborators, and how can people get in touch with you or follow the work you're doing online, or ILA's work online?
So definitely, when we go to every country, what we do is really try to work with the community there. So what we do is we try to get IT and engineer people to help us with the, call it, infrastructure and IT pieces in these countries. We try to work with local, call it, advertisement agencies, creative agencies, freelancers who want to do some work with us on the marketing front, because we really pride in our team and with ourselves about the creativity when it comes to customer engagement. So we do that. And then we really encourage people to visit us on our social media channels. All our hashtags and all social media channels are Ila Bank Bahrain right now. That's basically the main social media account. And that's where we do most of our communication and with our customers and world at large. And we really encourage people to go on there because we're quite active. I mean, on a daily basis, on every 2 hours, we have something posted, we have engagement. So I think it's our main basically channels for people to follow and see what's going on.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you grow around Asia because I think that the landscape, as it becomes more competitive, the customer wins, right? When you have more players
Exactly.
raising the stakes. So I look forward to seeing that. We can have a whole separate episode about kind of banking in the Philippines and some of the challenges to digitization and all that. But I think what we can do, those who are from the Philippines listening to the pod can actually look at Bahrain as a kind of a case study as to what can happen, you know, when you have forward-thinking regulation, and maybe it's something aspirational as well for us. So that would be interesting. I guess taking a break from all of the occupational hazards, we have a quick lightning round, just talking about some of your personal inspirations. So I'd like to shift a little bit to that. Do you think you could tell us what inspires you?
What inspires me? I think in terms of people, I'd say I've been always amazed and kind of inspired by, to be honest, my father, who I hold in very high regards. He's someone who started from a very humble background, and I'm amazed at how he has been able to, year after year, been able to redefine what he does. I've seen him go from the private sector to the public sector, back to the private sector. He's worked in financial services, telecom, community service, public service, and throughout his career has been able to leave an impact on the community here at Bahrain. So I always say to myself, I have big shoes to step into, and it's sort of this sort of engagement always has inspired me to drive myself to be better.
Sure.
Okay, fun fact. Mohamed and I actually met due to our shared love of cinema. We didn't have time to go through all the questions on my list, but I couldn't not ask him the film-related questions. So when we were done recording, I texted him these as a follow-up. Number 1, who would be your top pick to play you in the movie about your life? And he replied, I wish, Robert Redford. So apparently that's his favorite actor. And then I asked him, also, number 2, what is your favorite movie, or do you have any recommended viewing? Mohamed said Braveheart, because it has so many lessons and themes, the best one being always fight for what you believe in and never give up. So as a follow-up, I asked him what was his favorite Robert Redford film, since he was such a fan, and he gave me 3. The Great Gatsby, that's the 1974 edition, Spy Game, and The Last Castle. All highly recommended, so do check them out.
Any recommended reading?
Okay, so I think one of the things that I love doing is reading, and not only reading books, but reading sort of now what social media has given you guys as a platform to really have information at your fingertip. And it's something that basically one of the best advices I got from my investment banking boss is the first day on the job, he had Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, The Economist on my desk. And he said, every day you need to come having read them because I'm going to have a pop quiz for you. And he did. And I think the rigor and the rigor that he gave me is amazing, because my ability to really be informed about what's happening in the world, all kinds, whether it's markets, financials, politics, art, has really given me the ability to speak to people to really people sort of revolve around me. I can have a conversation with anyone I can see in the streets because of what I know. So I'd suggest to people that now with the digital age that, listen, if you want to understand like what's happening in technology, there are some great websites with newsletters there. There is TechCrunch. There is something called Sifted, SIFTED, by the Financial Times, specifically on fintech. The Economist app is always a great app to have. I really enjoy these days using an app called Medium, having the ability to basically cipher through all the kind of interesting things you want to read about. So I find that really helpful. I also have the Wall Street Journal app with me on my phone and tablets, always reading something over there. And then I think the last thing which I kind of like to do is listen to podcasts like this one and others, while I'm driving to work or back from work, or even having sort of a walk outside, because, I love learning from people. I think one of the things that don't underestimate is learn from people, learn from leaders, learn from others, because these guys will tell you exactly what it is really like.
Yeah. What is the best advice you ever received?
Best advice I ever received is, I think, from my grandfather, may his soul rest in peace. He said to me once that in your life, don't work for titles, don't work for money, don't work for awards. Work so that the day you get buried, you're going to have the most number of people at your funeral bidding you your farewell. And I remember when, unfortunately, he passed away and I attended his funeral, there were like thousands of people. And he was a simple person, but he had, over his lifetime, helped so many different people and made so many different impacts in the lives of many, that he was remembered so fondly. And I think that was the greatest achievement. And once that happened, it's really allowed me to understand that life is not only about headlines on newspapers, but it's really about how you make a difference around the people that you live with, not only your friends and family, but the community at large that you are part of.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I couldn't think of a more fitting way to end this. I think that the events of the past few months have really brought to light what is important, and everything that you mentioned about, your legacy, wanting to mentor people, having an impact on their lives more so than any, titles and awards and, proof of accomplishment and whatnot. That's what really matters, right? So I'm sure
Exactly.
I'm sure that the people listening, I'm sure that will resonate with a lot of them. And I really want to thank you for spending time with us today. I've learned so much from listening to you. You've given me a lot to think about, not just about banking, but about life in general. So this was very much appreciated.
My pleasure. It was great. And I hope that the audience find this quite insightful. And many thanks again for hosting me.
Yeah. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening, guys. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, and share with a friend so that others can find the pod as well. Do check out @occupationalhazards.podcast on Instagram, where we have more updates from our guests and some listener feedback. Slide into our DMs. We'd love to hear from you. Catch you next episode.